Episode 2, Disney Plus, another Marvel animation review, Mutant Liberation begins. And it's your boy Icon with another animated review. So, I'm kind of over what happened in the first episode now. Like, I'm settling in. I'm trying to get used to, like, the different voice actors and, you know, like, the drawing style, the super HD and everything. Cyclops still a bitch. But now Magneto, he's taken the fold because in Charles's will, he said that he wanted Magneto to be the leader of the X-Men in an effort, because, you know, the two of them were always on opposite ends, whereas, like, Magneto wanted to eradicate humankind for them wanting to eradicate mutant kind. So now they're going at odds, and that was the whole story between, like, good and evil. Like, the classic, like, Dr. King versus Malcolm X saga. So now, but in Charles's will, he put Magneto in charge of the X-Men in an effort to get Magneto to kind of do things differently and see things from his perspective. So now Magneto's whole thing is he's like, I'm going to honor the legacy of one Charles Xavier. And of course, Cyclops ain't buying it because he's jealous that everything was left to Magneto when it wasn't left to him, and he's pitching a fit. So while they're doing it, Magneto's actually doing some good things. Like, I remember the episode where in the 90s where Storm had fought the leader of those underground mutants who were downstairs in the sewers. And I was like, she was the leader of them. I remember she defeated the person and she became the leader of them. Magneto went down there because they were being attacked by some radicalists. And when Magneto went down there, he rescued them because they were on the verge of getting, you know, like killed or exterminated, you know, by a bunch of, like, you know, by, what is it, the Friends of Humanity or whatever. So they were about to die. Magneto swooped in. He saved them, but he didn't kill the Friends of Humanity because he said, in my old days, I would have killed them all. But to honor Charles's memory, he's like, you know, your lives will be spared this day. But then he took those mutants who were down in the sewers and he moved them to Genosha. And then he was just like, it behooves me why, with all the money and resources, Charles never decided to do this, nor any of you for that matter. And then he's nice, and now he's trying to, like, give, like, I'm the leader speech, and he's trying to talk them into it. Ain't nobody buying it. But, you know, Rogue was the one person who was just like, well, when I joined the team, you know, she said that I was a bad person too, but then I had to earn their respect, I had to earn their trust. And she said, for you, it's the same. And then he was like, oh, is that all I have to earn, Rogue? And then he touched her on the hand. Apparently, Rogue and Magneto used to hit it. Apparently, they used to be a thing. Magneto used to get some of that Rogue action. And Gambit found out about it, and he was like totally pissed. You know, so that's going to be a thing. I always thought that was actually, now that I'm thinking about it, are we sure that the person who's playing Rogue, are we sure that's not Mystique? Because I thought Mystique and Magneto were a thing, but then, like, Rogue isn't, like, Mystique like Rose's mom or something. I don't know, this is getting kind of weird. And now I'm starting to think at the end of the episode, like, Rogue went into the office, and then, like I said, like, there was the moment where it looked like he was gonna hit it. But then now I'm trying to think, like, maybe that's Mystique because he touched Rogue's hand and he didn't, like, you know, get his life force sucked out and fall on the floor. So I don't know. But anyway, so what happens now is, now that Magneto, he's like the leader of the X-Men, the government shows up and they're just like, well, Magneto, they said, for all the crimes you've committed in the past, you know, we're here to arrest you. And, you know, on behalf of, like, the United States government, you know, they're like, you're under arrest. Magneto's whole thing was he took control of the helicopters. He was like, on my best day, I'd kill you all. But he said, am I going to get a fair trial? He said, am I going to get, you know, the true form of due process? And if I'm found innocent, will I be allowed to continue my efforts to redeem myself in the good name of Charles Xavier? And then she was like, yeah, that's what due process is for. Then he was like, then I yield. So now that he yielded, that made the X-Men, you know, like, raise an eyebrow. So then now Magneto's on trial, you know, for all the crimes he committed. And he brought up an interesting point. He told the government, he said that the only crime I committed was protecting my people from the crimes committed by your people for wanting us, you know, to no longer be alive just for the fact that we exist. So now the UN is kind of like, well, you know, he's kind of got a point. It's like they know he got a point, but they don't want to say nothing. But then Jean and Wolverine, they're watching the whole trial at home. All the other X-Men were in the courtroom, and they were trying to figure out, like, how come no one told them about the whole court situation. And then while the two of them are watching the trial from home, Jean goes into labor. And the only person who was there is Wolverine, which I thought was hilarious. And then I'm like, what about Jubilee? Jubilee wasn't even she was in the episode, but she didn't even speak. So I'm like, wasn't she at the mansion? So that was weird. But then Wolverine ended up taking Jean down to the hospital. They refused to deliver her baby because she's a mutie. And then Rogue and Cyclops showed up at the hospital, and then Rogue basically delivered the baby on her own by taking the power of the doctor and, like, taking all his knowledge. Meanwhile, back at the UN, the mutant radical group, the Friends of Humanity, showed up, and they attacked the UN because they were going to kill Magneto. And during the battle, the X-Men are fighting the Friends of Humanity. The leader ended up getting into the into the courtroom, and there was a moment where Magneto was like basically using a shield to block out like the Friends of Humanity, but the leader, he had his rifle pointed at Magneto, and just before he fired the gun and destroyed Magneto, Storm jumped in the way and took the blast instead of Magneto, and then we found out that Storm lost her power because the gun that the person had, the inhibitor collar, exudes a certain sense of radiation. He said the blast that Storm was hit with is that radiation intensified, and it appears to have changed her on a cellular level, and now Storm lost her power. And I'm like, see how we do the black people? Like, see how we do the black people? There's only, I mean, I don't count Bishop because Bishop's from the future, and he was barely in the episode either, but I'm just like, we had one black person, and now they ain't even on the show no more. And then she left the show. Like, she ended up writing a note because Jean was like, oh, don't worry, Storm. Me and Cyclops aren't going anywhere. But then Storm was like, but I am, because she said that now I walk in a different world and I no longer have power. And I'm just like, so now we don't, like 2 episodes in, we done lost black people. I'm like, we can't have nothing. So now that Storm's gone, and even in the introduction, they added, and I made this whole thing about how Charles was coming back because Charles was still in the intro. They took Charles out of the intro and they replaced him with Magneto. So now in the 3rd episode, are we taking Storm out of the intro? And I don't like that because the part of the song, see, when you watch the show from back in the 90s, when the theme was playing, and then the part where it goes, like we're used to Jubilee doing the explosion, and they done pushed her further back in the intro music. So now when she does the explosion, the music's not the same anymore. I'm like, y'all ruining this whole thing. But Magneto, he has a cool suit on. I like his suit. He said that he wasn't going to wear the helmet anymore, but Magneto's like in the intro now, which is funny as hell. And humanity is safe. Well, he's safe because, like Storm protected him. And then Magneto got so upset over what happened to Storm and Storm losing her power that he defeated the guy who was the head of the Friends of Humanity. He took the Friends of Humanity guy along with the UN Council and brought them up into outer space. And then he was like, back in the day, I would have dropped you all into the nearest Milky Way. He was like, but I'm trying to be different. And he said, let this day prove that both mutant and human alike can come together, and we can start to recognize Charles Xavier's dream of peace between both parties. And then he ended up, bringing them back down. The UN decided, they were just like, hey, as one step towards a show of good faith, they decided to make Genosha part of the UN. So now a mutant representative is going to sit at the United Nations Council and speak on behalf of like mutant rights. And then Cyclops was like, I never thought I'd see the day. And he was like, that's why you weren't left in charge. But then he said, I guess him and Jean are going to stick around for a little bit, especially now that Storm is gone. And then after that, that's when Jean had found the letter that Storm had. And then while, like Magneto hit it, like Rogue went into his office, Magneto hit it. And then, then Gambit found out that, Magneto hit it. So now he's in his feelings. And then while they were reading Jean's goodbye note, then somebody knocked at the door, and the person who knocked at the door was Jean. And the weirdest thing about to me, it wasn't even weird that Cyclops and Jean were in the mansion and then Jean knocked on the door, because she could have come from the future, she could have come from the past. We don't know where it could be a shapeshifter. We don't know where this particular Jean, comes from. My whole thing was, when Jean knocked at the door, nobody actually looked at the other Jean, who had just given birth to this baby. So now I'm just like, are one of these two people Mystique? Where does Mystique fit in all this? What's the deal with Rogue and Magneto? I don't know, but we'll find out in episode 3, and thank you for tuning in. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, the show's good so far. They're just doing certain things that's just making me like roll my eyes, but I am enjoying the show. I mean, obviously at some point they're not getting rid of Storm, they're not gonna get rid of Storm. I just thought it was funny that it's like we only got one black character and y'all kicked her off the show. But Storm will probably be back before the 10 episode arc is over. We'll probably bring in some new mutants, because that's my whole thing now. Is like, are we gonna bring in new mutants? Are new mutants gonna come into the fold? But we'll see what happens in the next one. So share your questions, comments, and or concerns down below, and we will continue to talk about it. So check out my other reviews, because I got part 1 of the X-Men saga on my on my channel. Also, I have the footage and the coverage that I did with myself and Gotham Geek Girl Nadia from the Paladins of Cosplay. Check that out. Check out my Otakus and Geek shorts from the Hour podcast, and we will continue to roll on for some more television reviews, movie reviews, and everything in between. So until next time, guys, as the mutant and human race comes together, for Charles' dream, take care. Until next week, we're out this